What's going on, everyone? Jeremy here from The Quartering, and I hope you're having a wonderful day. There's an absolute metric ton of news going on around The Last of Us 2, some spicy interactions between former Kotaku and now Bloomberg reporter Jason Schreier and Neil Druckmann, an inspiring accessibility reaction, and much more. Hey, about 40% of my viewers are not subscribed. I'm just glad you're here viewing. But I'm hoping that today will be the day that I earn your subscription. There's usually a little red button below the video or on the main channel somewhere. I hope that you'll consider subscribing today. It just makes finding my videos easier, and it helps new people find the channel, since I guess YouTube won't think that everyone hates me. Now, I've been covering The Last of Us 2 at depth, at length, mostly around the leaks and the DMCA stuff, and Neil Druckmann and I had a very nice interaction on Twitter, which softened me to Neil the man. And I know many of my viewers still have zero interest in playing this game. That's totally cool. There's a lot of games that I have zero interest in playing. In fact, as it stands right now, I don't have very much interest in playing The Last of Us 2. Now, it has reinvigorated the idea of playing The Last of Us 1, but I don't know. My backlog is so vast, and between working full-time and YouTubing full-time, my free time to play video games is super precious. And right now I'm still playing Final Fantasy Online, and that's what I get time for. Interestingly enough, a store, speaking of memes, a store in Brisbane, actually put a very angry lesbian sign up. Like, this is real. A JB Hi-Fi store has created a very questionable The Last of Us Part 2 display. When a big game release comes around, one of my favorite things to do is seeing what creative store people do with their store displays. For instance, the Gamesmen have created an amazing The Last of Us Part 2 display, and I was in my local JB Hi-Fi today, and they'd created something similar in store, complete with hand-drawn illustrations. Sometimes these stores go a little bit too far. We've seen JB Hi-Fi push the boundaries with some of its game reviews before, but this The Last of Us 2 display from a Brisbane store absolutely oversteps the mark. Now, I don't know. I mean, I think it's funny, but I could definitely see how a corporation probably wouldn't have wanted to do this. At first glance, the display looks like you'd expect, but until you look a little bit closer, you see the store has recreated the cover of The Last of Us Part 2 with a title, A Very Angry Lesbian. Obviously, Ellie is a lesbian, and Naughty Dog has never shed away from this fact, choosing to embrace it throughout The Last of Us, Left Behind, and The Last of Us Part 2. But you have to wonder why someone would use it in this way they have in the store display. And here's a picture of it. It's real. It really existed. Somebody stuck it on there right in front of the game. And by the way, it's out here? That seems odd. Oh, June 19th. Okay. So they just have the display. They stuck that. I thought it was a troll. I really thought it was a troll. But actually, according to Kotaku, JB Hi-Fi has taken down Very Angry Lesbian promo from The Last of Us 2. Images from the promo began circulating on Twitter, and co-founder of Paperscape Press, a local indie comic stockist, the stand featured box copies, some fake overgrowth, mirroring the environments of a game. The offending element was a mock image of the box art reading A Very Angry Lesbian. By the way, they didn't create that. That's been floating around Twitter for, well, I don't know, weeks. So they just stole that from somebody else, which, you know, memes do get co-opted. The Brisbane store confirmed over the phone that stand has since been taken down. Asked why, the JB employee said they were not at liberty to discuss the reasoning. JB has now provided comment. At the time of writing, the company's staffers regularly use snark and humor in their reviews, most famously taking the piss at games like No Man's Sky, Fallout 76, and Anthem. The reviews for Last of Us Part 2, meanwhile, have been appearing last week. Most of critics have been effusive in their praise, although some are less impressed with Ellie's second outing. You know, interestingly enough, there's a good article by Eric Kane which discusses the reviews and exactly why you need to be very careful about them. The review embargo for The Last of Us Part 2 was lifted Friday the 12th, 1 week before the game's release. According to Metacritic, Naughty Dog's latest critical darling, nabbing a 96 out of 100 score, earning numerous gushing accolades from reviewers. Now, I'm trying not to rain on anyone's parade in this post, but there are a couple things I think readers should be aware of. First of all, the review embargo is quite strict. While most video game embargoes contain some kind of restrictions on what you can talk about in the video game footage, this one forbids discussion of any of the second half of the game and limits footage to just 3 scenes. The final 12 hours or so are completely off limits, so things that reviews liked or disliked about the portion of that game can only be discussed vaguely. I understand wanting to keep spoilers out of reviews as much as possible, but this strikes me as more than a little over the top. Whether or not this leaves something important out is impossible to say. I haven't played the game. Well, I can tell you this, that one of the most popular reviews of The Last of Us 2 here on YouTube has been done by YouTuber Skill Up, and he says in that exact review that no, he didn't like, there's particularly something really annoying or bad that happens around the 12-hour mark that he hated, but he couldn't talk about it. Interestingly enough, he also referred to the game as the Last Jedi of video games. So we're left with a very big, roughly 12-hour question mark, with some reviewers saying whether or not you like the game may come down to what happens in that section, but they're not able to talk about it. Others note that the game's best bits are in embargoed stretch. The best bits are in there. Second, and arguably most importantly, some reviewers, those who ultimately liked the game, found that the roughness extreme to the point of questioning whether or not they could even finish playing the game. Since the game is somewhere between 25 and 30 hours, you can see how that could be a problem. Also, the game only being 25 hours, meaning most reviews, if you play it through the quickest possible way, they're only reviewing half of the game. It's not just this. Some critics call the story needlessly bleak. Its characters completely changed from the first game, and the story is riddled with plot holes. Let's take a look at the scene from the most critical reviews, if only get information more than best game ever, 10 out of 10. Note also, many of the reviews I'll be quoting don't include review scores. In other words, some of the most critical reviews out there don't impact the final Metacritic score at all. I've always felt a little uncomfortable with the idea of a sequel of The Last of Us had a dang near perfect ending, one of the best, most ambiguous and unsettling I've ever encountered. If nothing else, a sequel means that ending is no longer actually an ending. The story picks up years later. According to everything I've read and watched, the characters have changed. Ellie in particular has become someone else entirely. In SkillUp's excellent review, The Last of Us Part 2, the YouTuber compares Ellie and her story of The Last of Us 2 to Daenerys Targaryen in the final series of Game of Thrones. That's a deeply unflattering comparison, and what he means for it to be. Watch the whole video below. Some big takeaways are character choices and plot holes were so bad throughout at times he would laugh out loud. The game is 25 hours long, and one section feels like a 10-hour side quest. He wouldn't have even finished it had he not been reviewing. There are improvements to graphics, combat, exploration, but enemy AI is still bad. The story is relentlessly bleak. There are very few interesting / scripted cinematic scenes, and the game is far too long and boring. And on the plus side, it has difficulty settings and fine-tuning and as ever, and looks gorgeous. Interestingly enough, that is a point of interest to me. Will the 96% score hold after some of the review embargoes are lifted? If that 12-hour mark inside the video game is its most controversial part, what does that mean for the final scores? Will they actually affect things? And certainly over the weekend, interestingly enough, Neil Druckmann called out some video game critics for some of their needlessly inflammatory jokes. You can see Neil Druckmann saying here, with all due respect, I find these kind of ironic jokes to be unproductive at best. We can do better with critical discourse, especially by those of us with thousands of followers, and especially about a sensitive subject matter. This all coming out of the initial joke, which I covered over the weekend, Jeff Kanata saying, in a medium where everything is John Wick, The Last of Us Part 2 is Schindler's List. And just like the film, there were times when I thought I couldn't keep going. And then you see Jason Schreier's deleted response to this. See, BioShock's audio logs are a lot like the Diary of Anne Frank, one of 37. Jason Schreier didn't take too kindly to that by saying, hey, Neil, this is weirdly personal. Still not sure why you feel the need to go after me after multiple times for expressing what I felt the analogy was tacky. I don't think Neil was going after Jason Schreier, and we all know Jason Schreier is quick on the block button and one of the most sensitive humans in the video game industry ever. He goes on to say, I sure hope it's not related to my recent reporting on your studio. Be well. Best of luck on the launch. See, what he's saying here is he's implying that Neil Druckmann targeted him because Jason Schreier reported on Crunch inside of Naughty Dog. But interestingly enough, Cory Barlog here, who you might know from the industry as well, tweets are difficult to interpret. I have to say that this is that lately you've come across a bit of a bully, Jason. I get that your bread and butter is tearing us down, but not everything is about your book or your articles. Sometimes it's just about being decent to one another. So Jason Schreier getting absolutely destroyed. And also you see down the thread, you should see here, Schreier absolutely getting a little butthurt about it, saying hyperbole is fun, but when you're thinking about comparing the new zombie video game to a movie about the Holocaust, maybe hit the brakes a little bit. And then he goes on and on to reply to just about everybody. And in fact, I have another thread here. Neil Druckmann saying, they're back and forth going, oh, I'm being too sensitive. I have some of my family members who who died in Auschwitz. Oh my God. Of course, he goes straight to that. Neil says, to me, it's clear Jeff is comparing an emotional response between two pieces of media. I didn't take it as a direct comparison between our game and that event itself or in any way to diminish that film. I'm not trying to pick a fight, but I do feel obligated to respond as these kinds of comments can escalate to claims of anti-Semitism. By the way, this is coming from someone who lost many members of my... Oh, it's a victim off. Be prepared. And then Neil replies, Neil, I would be shocked, or Jason, sorry, I would be shocked if you weren't reacting positively to a thread hyperventilating over your game. To an outside observer, it comes off as clumsy and crass. Congrats on the launch. Looking forward to playing. Dripping with sarcasm. He goes on to say, your voice carries a lot of weight, Neil does. Your public comments about Jeff invite dogpiling, which I'm sure isn't your intention. Oh my God, these are like two catty women talking. I'm not sure this is your intention, but I experienced a lot of that in the past few weeks. I wanted to say something. For what it's worth, I think our game does not hold a candle to Schindler's List. You get that these people, I mean, I don't know how else to describe it, but the just dripping with sarcasm and cattiness. I absolutely love it. The game comes out in just 4 days. I'll be looking forward to see actual reviews come out that aren't held back by embargoes. I hope you enjoyed this video. We'll talk to you again real soon.